I welcome you all for today's LLS by our alumnus, Miss Purvi Gupta, aka Zufi, which is her Insta name. And yeah, so Purvi graduated from IIT Madras in 2009 with a dual degree in biotech, and she then joined GlaxoSmithKline's London office as a graduate associate and later worked in Mumbai and Singapore offices. Subsequently, she completed her MBA from INSEAD in France and is currently employed by McKinsey at London. She is passionate about healthcare, climate change, and gender parity. She is the only Indian who is part of the 2018 cohort of the 80 Women Expedition to Antarctica as a part of Homeward Bound, a grassroots initiative on climate change. Yeah, so let's begin the talk on Purvi's journey from IIT Madras to Antarctica.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks so much for listening. And thank you so much for everybody who's turned up. I understand the rain is really bad outside, so I do appreciate you making the effort to come up. I'm basically going to share three things today. One is just bringing to life what I have done in the last 8-9 years. So I graduated in 2009. What's been my journey, and hopefully that's interesting. Hopefully there's something to resonate or think about. The other thing I'm going to talk about is my idea of leadership. How has my idea of what leadership means changed over the years? What do I think about it? How do I position it? And I think you will see the roots of that will probably set in that. And the last thing would be about passion. How do you figure out what your passions are? How much my passion energizes you, and how that's so relevant and important, especially when we have so many things to do out there. So those are kind of the things I will talk about. I think we should be about 30-35 minutes, not too long, so don't be sleeping and be spoke to. And happy to take questions after that. Is it good? I'm loud enough. I'm loud enough, right? Okay. So I flashed this slide to begin with because when I was younger, I spent a lot of time in the train. Why would say? My father was actually making great things, and we lived all across the country. We Kharagpur, we Nagpur, we Bilaspur, we lived all across the country. And one of the distinct memories I have is spending a lot of time going home to Delhi. So Delhi was home. Whether it was Diwali, whether it was a festival, whether it was summer vacations. And for me, that laid the foundation of how I draw my inspiration from my family. It was always important, the aunts and uncles and the cousins. My grandmother was one of the first people to be educated in his family, and he made sure his sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters, we all were educated. Coincidentally, we're all engineers, not by design, just so happens. For me, I think the values that my family holds are how they thought about the world and what they passed on passionately. And wherever I may live today, it's important for me to be able to come back. And I think the same thing has extended to whether it's the IITM family or it's people I work with families and concept of life. And I think the longest journey I probably have on it was from then to Chennai when I came to the campus. I'd never stayed. I'd never been on a train for 36 hours before I did that. I didn't have a cost at that point. I think I would not be exaggerating if I said that I came here and I was quite surprised, especially when I walked into the mess. We didn't have lots of different menu options, which apparently you guys have today. I walked in and we didn't even have food such problems at that time. So like sambar, rasam, rice. I'm like, right, how does this work? But then today, I could eat sambar every day of the week and I'll be absolutely fine. My favorite thing became the gongura, and I would wait for my friends to bring gongura from their houses. I left NC after 5 years with a very strong damn accent. I don't have it today, but it was a very strong familiar accent. And I think when I look back, I can think of it as it was probably the strongest message or lesson I had in national education. I've lived in mostly, different parts of the world, and I tend to be there's West Side, I met somebody from Karnataka, I met somebody from Tamil Nadu, I met somebody from Andhra. And today my friends are all over. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And I think that laid the foundation of how collaboration and diversity are really important. When you have people with diverse backgrounds, diverse regions, come together with a product is a lot more powerful than what you could come up with yourself. Also, I think being a girl in IITM is a very different experience. I don't know how many of you can relate to it, but in my batch in 2004, we were 50 out of 500. Geography was the one girl's hostel among them was boys. And as much as I wanted to be part of all the activities that was going on, a lot of activities that was going on in the boys' hostels. I knew everybody in Sharab, obviously, and I knew a lot of people, but I couldn't ever know all the full batches in a particular hostel and what this person did and what that person did. I always felt that the war lines were drawn and Sharab was not even on the map. I always felt I had so much to say. I wanted to hear it specifically. I wanted, to bring voice to what you felt, but I never found the right medium. I did become the gym sec for Sharab, and I did take a lot of issues up with the needs of students and did go. But what it left me was that I never felt included. And I don't know if it's changed. I would love to hear from you, but I always left with the feeling of I was there, I was part of it, but I wasn't invited to the party. I wanted a word of it. I really did. What it left me today is that if I have a team today, working with different people, I'm very conscious of that one person who doesn't fit in, who doesn't say much, but probably has a lot to say. I've become a lot more understanding of what it means to be inclusive and why we need to involve everybody who's part of the community, part of the discussion. You probably will recognize this image from my CSI. Going a step further, 2008, which is when I sat for placements, and it was also the time of financial crisis. There weren't that many jobs to give out. I remember, when you sit for placements, you look at your resume, you look at the senior's resume from last year. Oh, this person had this, they got this job, I'll probably fit in there. That's the box. It's like, okay, I was GenSec, I was starting part, blah, blah, blah. I'll probably get a job in the week one. That was my, not very humble view of it, but I was like, this is what's going to happen. Interesting, I only worked one white shift. It would go for 4 days, 8 interviews, and day 1, day 2, day 3, I didn't get a job by the end of day 5. It was tough times. I went out on Saturday and bought a new shirt because I really needed to do some placements the week after. I got a job on day 11 in the end with a software company based out of Gurgaon. They delayed the joining by another year, which is not great. I thought this was the worst time in my life. I had hit rock bottom. I'd studied for 2 years so well. I went to IIT Madras. I thought this was what's going to happen. And then I couldn't even get a job. What I would say at this point is, one of the things I learned from that experience is thinking outside of the box. And I would encourage you, as you plan what you might do after graduation. It's easy to fit yourself in the box on the basis of what people did last year or the year before. Try and think outside of it. The magic happens outside. The best adventures happen outside of it. What I would also say is, it really depends on the skills that you learn in the first few years of the job. It lays the foundation of what your career might be in the years to come. So focus on the skills. What are you actually going to get out, and what's the foundation you're building? It didn't turn out too bad for me. I ended up applying to a UK-India graduate scheme. It was started that year, and the idea was to have about 8 to 10 Indian graduates to actually go to the UK and work with different companies for a period of 6 to 12 months. So I applied to that, and I got selected as a procurement associate to work for GSK in their London offices. GSK, getting to London and getting to GSK opened a whole plethora of opportunities. I had no idea what procurement was. I don't know how many of you guys know. Somebody said it's purchase, somebody says it's like shopping with somebody else's money. I had no idea what it was. But that's where I learned that procurement was basically buying materials for all the products that GSK manufactures. So I was responsible for a lot of supply. Where do we buy the raw materials? How do we make sure it gets to the right factory? And that's where I learned my first skill set. It was also a very global setup. I was working with people from different manufacturing sites across all of Europe. I never experienced that before, and that was a new experience in terms of learning how to manage that. I remember the first week that I was actually in GSK, I had a call with the head of the plant in Scotland, and I pick up the phone, and I'm like, this is what I want. He answers me back, no idea what he's talking. I just couldn't understand his accent. The English accent was just so tough to understand. Like, okay, take a deep breath, ask again. So, what do you want? I have no idea. And at the end, I put the phone down and wrote him an email. At least we both wrote the same language, so that was slightly easier. What I would say is that whatever your first job may, embrace it. If it's a non-technical job, you might have different challenges to experience. If it is a technical job, you might be a lot more confident because you know the stuff. Math is it lets you speak for itself, right? But I would say, independent of what you end up joining as your first job out of the campus, embrace the opportunity it brings with it. Take it in your stride. Learn the things that it brings and be open to the ideas. Be open to everything it brings to you. For me, as I said, I went into procurement and it taught me how to negotiate. I used to negotiate for a living. That's what I did for 5 years of my life, right? And what is negotiation? So for me, it came down to, it was like playing human chess. I'm trying to find out what you're thinking, you're trying to find out what I'm thinking. And whoever figures this out, where your value lies and where my value lies, kind of wins the negotiation. So that was absolutely amazing. And the 3 things I learned as part of a negotiation, and it could be negotiating for things in life, things as part of your job. One thing is you always have to be really prepared. You have to do your research and you have to have a backup option. That's what a partner is, a best alternative to your negotiated agreement. When I went to negotiate with suppliers in terms of trying to procure their supply, I was always more confident if I already had a backup supplier, because I knew if this fell through, I have an option, I have a backup option. So always prepare what is your best other alternative, and always think about, have you done all the research and you're confident in your answers. The second thing which I learned was about breaking stereotypes. If you think the person on the other side of the table expects you to behave in manner X, do the Y. Don't let them predict you. One of the common things I had as a procurement manager was I would walk into a room and they would look at me saying, Indian women must be me, probably can't make any decisions, I can just draw. And I knew that was the assumption they were going to go for. So I always talked very clearly in a loud voice, made sure they knew I was really confident. I agreed with my boss in advance what I could make decisions on, and very early I would show them I actually have the power of decision making. So it's very important to be able to, if you're able to break that stereotype, then the other person, steps back. They're like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go anymore, and you get more leverage when you get more power. The third thing which I learned, and most of these things actually stand true for life, is ask for more. We shouldn't rationalize what I think the other person might give me. So if I was in a typical supplier negotiation, if I wanted, say, a 10% price reduction, right, and the supplier could probably do 8%, the real negotiation is happening in the zone between 8 to 10%. But if I assume already, the country's going through a bad time, the supplier probably doesn't have access, there's too much rain, let me just ask for 5%. I've already lost the battle. So always ask for more, and you'll be surprised how many times the answer is yes. And as I was learning this in my work, I started to apply this in my life. What does that mean? I started to ask for more. At this point, I'd been in London for 2 years, working for GSK as a procurement associate. I asked for a promotion. I asked that I wanted to go and live and work in Mumbai for a while. And I asked for mentorship. And I was so surprised that I got yes for all 3 of them. They said, sure, we'll create a job for you and you should go back to Mumbai. We will promote you and make you a buyer, and we will offer you mentorship support. So my 2 cents would be always ask for more, because you'd be surprised how many people actually say yes. Moving to Mumbai was great personally. It was great to be back, meet a lot more batchmates around the campus. It was very comfortable, but it was really tough. I had 2 years work experience, I was much younger, and nobody would take me seriously. I had a manager position, I think promoted a bit early, and nobody would take me seriously. The person who led the team in India, in the India office, had 20 years plus of experience and didn't think I had anything which was useful to say. It was a really tough time for me. And as I earlier said, a lot of you who go in non-technical jobs will face that because people will challenge your authority. It doesn't matter what your title is, they will challenge the fact that you actually know enough. If you don't have 10 or 20 years of experience, you may not know enough. And I think it's easier in technical jobs because you can use the power of books or what it says is black and white. You can't stand up there and this is black, this is white. And even in your first promotions where you get into managerial positions, you will feel that there is a lot of challenge. What I did and what I think worked well was to change the context of the discussion. So if the question is, well, you don't have experience, we don't know, blah, 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 instead of trying to change their attitude, change the discussion point. I pivoted myself to start working more and more in Southeast Asia. I realized it's going to be much harder for me to manage a listing. So I widened the whole approach of the team. We were like, okay, let's look beyond India, let's increase the area. They needed more manpower, they needed more people to actually look at those geographies. So I started to do that. And the other thing is also what I've realized, and I'm still learning this, is if you wanted to be treated like a peer, you have to treat your seniors like a peer. A lot of time, we grow up with an awe of our seniors. And I think they're very respectful and they have a lot of respect, a lot of experience. But I think if you want to have a peer-like discussion, you have to first start to talk to them or offer them things like a peer. And that's when you get the response. It's something I'm still learning to do, but it's very, very, very cool. And I think what was interesting for me was as I spent more time within Southeast Asia and India, I became really passionate about the idea of access to medicine. And you may ask me, what is access to? I'm thinking about 2 elements. Access is simply people being able to buy the medicines that are available. And as a person who came from procurement, it came down to reducing the cost of manufacture of that medicine. So how much can we reduce it at, which means how much can we price it at, which means can we have larger parts of the population actually be able to buy that medicine. The second thing about access is geography, so the supply chain element of it. Can we actually make the medicines available to people in far-flung areas? And that's what access means as well. So for me, those 2 elements started to become really important as I understood how do we price the medicine so that people can access it, and how do we establish a supply chain model that more people can actually reach it. It's available to them for their use. And I think emerging markets obviously has a special case going on, and I believe personally that in terms of the healthcare model, innovation is going to come in emerging markets. If you think about the US, the healthcare model is such that it's mostly private insurance. So most people would pay for it out of pocket. It tends to be quite expensive. If you think about the Europeans, the European countries, most of it tends to be social, which is the government pays for healthcare for most populations. Now in Asia, in most emerging markets, none of those can work because of the size of the economy and the number of people we have, we can't really have social healthcare for everybody. Similarly, again, given the price points of people, we can't have private healthcare because most people will not be able to buy healthcare. So I feel like the innovation in terms of how we're going to solve that problem, whether it's India, whether it's Southeast Asia, how are we going to solve that problem for big populations, for economies which are much smaller, is going to come in Asia, in emerging markets. And that is going to make medicine accessible. It's a topic that I closely follow and hopefully can affect it someday. Now, as you probably would know that most of us in the room will probably have 3 or 4 careers in our life. My first career was as a procurement professional, which lasted about 5.5, 6 years. I'm now a consultant, a strategy consultant, and I've been here 2 years, so I'm already on my second career. And I think as you develop new skills and as you become an expert in an area, you will start to see the interaction with other parts of the business. and that's when you take the jump and understand that better. So what I would encourage you to say, think about is not the first job might not be the only job you do for the rest of your life, but think of it as steps in careers. You will mostly end up doing more than one. For me, as I said, I came from procurement and I was starting to get a good understanding of the manufacturing. How does the supply chain work? How does the manufacturing? But I was getting interested in access to medicine. I was getting interested in healthcare models. And I wanted to have a more holistic view. I wanted to understand how does it all connect together. And that's when I made the decision to go to an MBA school. I'd come from a science perspective. I knew about supply chain and manufacturing. And to get that business edge, to understand how does sales and marketing interact? How do we actually price a product? How do we think about that? I decided that I needed to upskill myself, and I went to MBA school. And I think what's interesting to realize is, as humans, we work in almost three capacities broadly. The first is where you're very comfortable. So the job you've been defined to get is within your skill set. You've done it, you know how exactly it works. So that's your comfort level. The second level is where you slightly stretch. So 80% of your job is probably, or whatever work you're doing, is probably within your skill set. And 20% of the time you stretch. That's when you grow and learn. And the third level is where you have a job or you have a piece of work to do which is beyond your capabilities or your experience. Now the first one is where you get complacent. You start to lose interest, you start to look for other things to do. The third one, the highest one, is quite frustrating because you hit success less, you hit failure because it tends to be outside your space. The best idea is when you slightly stretch. So you still are successful at things you know, you're still working very well, but then you're also being asked to do things which are beyond your capability, and you stretch and grow as an individual. For me, it was that stage now. I'd been in procurement for 5 years. I had a good sense of my job. I was starting to get complacent, and it was important for me to realize and start, is this really stretching me, or do I need to go and learn another skill set and go into a different direction? So I decided that was probably that window of time. And it was very interesting that I had a number of discussions with my father. He said, you're in a comfortable job, why do you need to switch? What are you missing? You're earning well, you know what your job is, you're well respected, you're getting a promotion, why do you need to switch? But I think it was a nagging feeling that I had that no, I need to figure out what am I doing. If I stay here, I'll probably do the same thing for the next 5 years. And what I would say is that always ask yourself, are you satisfied with the status quo? Are you really happy where you are, what you're doing? And question yourself, because that's how you will grow and you will develop as an individual as you stretch the boundaries and you question. For me, INSEAD was an explosion of ideas, people, personalities. We had about 99 nationalities on campus. It was probably the most inclusive place I've been. We had about 30% women. And it was also where every person wanted to learn from each other. It didn't matter where they came from, who they were. If there was a Brazilian party on campus, I was still invited as an Indian. If we had a Diwali party, my friend who is French or Pakistani were both invited, and we were very happy. So I think the whole notion that I had, that diversity and global collaboration was good for us as a community, just became really true. And I met so many like-minded people who did believe in the same thing and who wanted to actually establish collaboration, learn from each other. What did I know better, or what could I do better? It could be across industries, it could be across personal experiences, it could be about your cultures and what works well and what doesn't work well. The two things that I took away from my MBA was a greater self-awareness. I became a lot more aware of what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, how I came across to people, what was my leadership style, how did I take feedback, and just becoming a lot more self-aware of myself, having worked for 5 years, and then meeting people who had different personalities. I met people, I liked something about them and I wanted to bring it to myself. Or I met people who are like, I don't want to be like that, but I don't want to be like that. So it was quite interesting in becoming what mattered and what was the self-awareness, who I was and who I wanted to be. The second thing was managing time and managing energy. Once you guys move into your jobs, you'll get busy, your friends will get busy, you lose touch and people move on. But I guess it's always important to know what is it that you really value. For me, family and relationships were really important. So I made sure that even though it was really busy, even though there were 1,001 things to do, how do I prioritize? How do I prioritize and make sure that I'm able to spend the time and energy doing the things that I'm passionate about? It is quite easy to just run from place to place, but actually prioritizing was another skill that I learned. Also, my first semester at INSEAD was probably one of the toughest that I had. And if I look back, it was because I was struggling with the definition of how do I measure success? How do I actually measure if I'm going to do well at this MBA school or not? And growing up in India, as you probably all know, we tend to measure success by how many marks you got or what was your GPA. Not saying we should all strive for good ones, so let me be clear. But I think that's how I measured myself every time I've been in school. Did I come first? Did I come second? How many marks did I get? When I was in here, I was always measuring myself by, oh, how much is my GPA? What did I do? And for INSEAD, it just did not work as a measure of success because there was too much happening. There was the networking, the social element, the trying to figure out your career and what job you wanted, and also the education and the studies. If I wanted to have a respectable GPA, I could still do that and do other things. If I wanted to be on the dean's list, I would have to give up something. I think what was different from being on campus here and being at INSEAD was on campus I could still do everything. I could just take lessons, probably still do Saring and Shastra and CADs and everything. But at INSEAD, when you're in a professional setting, you have to choose. You have to say, what are you going to invest your time in? And I really struggled because I was a social extrovert person and I believed in relationships and building meeting people and building relationships was important to me. But I was trying to keep that aside because I wanted to be on the dean's list and I spent time in the library. And I was miserable because it wasn't my natural ability, it wasn't what I wanted to aspire to, and that's what I was trying to do. So come back to the point, for me, the definition of success changed. And once I knew how to define success for myself, I was able to actually pursue that and be successful at it. So I would encourage you to think about what is your definition of success? What does that mean? When 10 years later, where do you want to be and how does that measure up in a way? The other thing I also learned at INSEAD, and this is part of my reflections of self-awareness, was my leadership style. My leadership style was quite direct. Partly my Indianness and partly my negotiation training. I just tended to be more direct. But what I've realized with being with different people from diverse cultures, not everybody wanted to cross through. They just didn't appreciate it and they didn't respond to me in the right way. But I learned that if you think about leadership, you can think about them in kind of 3 or 4 styles. One is more the direct style, which is you do this, you do that. And it tends to work really well in situations such as emergencies. If there was a fire in the building, we'd all rather follow one person rather than having different ideas altogether. The other one is a more collaborative or an inclusive leadership style, which tends to work well in peer organizations. So if you think about the Saring or the Shastra, right? You're working with your peers and you would like to be inclusive and collaborative and take decisions as a group. And the third one is more non-interfering leadership style, which is more about you just let people run without giving them direction. And that normally you would see in voluntary organizations, where people come in, donate part of their time or effort for a cause. And those tend to be more, the non-interfering leadership style. And I think what's important to realize is there's no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong, but it's good to know what your natural style is and how you adapt your style depending on what the situation is. As I said, if there was a fire here, we would rather follow one person, right? But if I'm trying to come up with the best idea of, being creative and actually being inclusive and collaborative and hearing different ideas from different people is going to be better. So the idea to know what your natural style is and how to adapt it in different situations, how do you respond to it differently. something I learned as I progressed through, especially at INSEAD. After INSEAD, I ended at McKinsey, the job I aspired to in 2008 when I was sitting in the same auditorium. But there was a difference. There was a difference. The difference was I knew why I was here this time. I wasn't here this time because it was the day one job and the top job on the campus. There was a set of skills I really wanted to learn. There was a set of skills which would allow me to get to my vision of what I wanted to achieve. And for me, that was moving away from operational to a more strategic mindset. So I'd done operational job for about 5 or 6 years. And I wanted a more holistic view of industry. I wanted to think about how do I think in terms of what is a 5-year plan? How do I build vision? How do I think about strategy? And that's why I became this time. And if you think about it, I was kind of walking across the value chain in my years. In the biotech department, I learned a little bit about the synthesis behind materials. How do we actually biochemical engineering, the downstream processing. Then I moved into the manufacturing bit in GSK. How do we buy materials? How do we supply them to the factories? How do they manufacture them? And then in McKinsey now, I'm in this space, which is how do we sell products? How do we distribute and sell products? And how do we actually get hospitals to be engaged with us from healthcare? So both in the patients and the hospital. So I've ended up kind of walking across the value chain. So to give you an example of what I mean by what I do today is one of the projects I worked with was with a medtech company. So they make instruments such as heart walls or cardiac surgery equipment. And we worked with them in terms of understanding how to price the product. So what should be the pricing of the product as compared to the competition already in the market? What would the patient or the hospital be ready to pay? What are the reimbursement levels? Pulling all of that together and understanding, well, how much should we price it? It's too high, too low, because if it's too high, nobody's going to buy it. If it's too low, you're underselling and you would never make as much money. So getting that optimal pricing was one of the things. Another project I worked on was with a company who wanted to acquire a new emerging technology. That was probably the one time I used my biotech knowledge. I was the only one in the room who could talk about genetic mutations and immunotherapies. And we looked at lots of companies which were emerging technologies or therapies, understanding them, being able to present them at a CEO meeting and saying, you know what, this is what you're interested in. It was very interesting in terms of deciding what's the level of detail you want to present. As somebody who's done the research, I wanted to tell them everything. This is how you do it, this is the company involved in it, this is the clinical trial. CEO is not interested in that. So being able to go 20,000 deep to do the research, but then come back to the helicopter view and present that idea, that's the skill I learned. And that was the project that I was doing. Another one that I did was, another one which I did was with the hospitals. So we worked with the emergency department in the hospitals. And we were trying to reduce their turnaround time. So if a patient came in, how many hours does a patient spend in the hospital before they actually get seen or before they actually get a cure? And we were trying to reduce that timeline. So those are the example of kind of projects I work on today, which has taken me beyond, as I say, the manufacturing, the R&D, but getting into this space. And that's what I wanted to get out, which is why I was happy. Now, along the way, I will finally show you the slide. Along the way, I met lots of people who became my mentors, my sponsors, my coaches, and who were responsible for the journey that I've actually overtaken for a few years. And I don't know how many of you know the difference between a coach and a mentor or a sponsor. I will spell it out. A coach is somebody who actually trains you on your job. So my first manager was one of the people who actually taught me how I do my job, how to negotiate. What do you put on the table, what do you not put on the table? He's responsible for who I became as a procurement professional. Mentors are people who give you more advice. They would share experiences. When I was in a particular situation, this is how I faced, this is what happened. I would advise you to do this. So mentors tend to be mostly people who may not have done the same job. A coach would normally have done the same job, but a mentor would have the wider industry experience. And then a sponsor is somebody who opens up opportunities for you. So they would make the introduction. They would do a recommendation letter. So they would be ones who want you to succeed. and provide you opportunities or open doors for you so that you can actually receive those opportunities. And this is just a subset of a number of people who helped me through the years. And I don't know if anybody's from Naval, they probably will recognize Professor A.D. Chandy, who is the Dean of Students at the time I was on campus. And somebody I just kept in touch with and they became a mentor to me as I decided to go for an MBA or decided to join McKinsey. And we just ended up doing. What I would also like to point out that the mentorship and relationship can be quite mutual. It's very easy to assume, and I did that when I was younger, assume that, my mentor is so senior, what can I really bring to him? What is it that I can really bring to him? It's going to be one way. But actually, they really like meeting the new ideas. Sometimes your mentors who might be really experienced actually want to know the newest trends in the industry. What's happening? What is everybody talking about? And they may not have the time and the capacity to actually keep on touch, but you can bring that to the table. One of my earlier managers, I met him recently about 3 weeks ago, and he's at the stage now that he's being redundant in his job. He's got 40 years of experience being redundant in his job. He's done that job for 40 years of his life. And it's quite difficult to think about what the opportunities are out there. And that's what I was able to bring to him, to be able to have a conversation and say, well, what are you thinking about? I've heard this about that. Can I introduce you to person X and Y? Because I had my network from INSEAD now to actually bring to him. So when you think about mentorship and when you think about relationships, I would say they're always mutual. As much as you invest in them, the other person will invest back because you see that they can derive value from it as well. And as you go forward, your network will grow. It might be, I think at the time I was on campus, it was mostly professors who I got advice from. I got a lot of advice from my father, who's been an important role model. And also your peers, your seniors, 2-year seniors, 4-year seniors, depending on what they've done. So that was my network. And I'm now getting to the stage where I'm starting to give advice to my juniors from campus or people I've worked with before. So invest forward, but also think about who else can you give advice to and how that relationship is always mutual. Along the way, I got married last year. I turned 30, and everything seemed to be going very well. I had a number of friends from INSEAD around the world who came to visit. For me, that was the sign of success, because I had defined success for myself as someone who invests in relationships. And them making the trip from across the world to come see me for 2 days was the definition that they actually cared about me as well. So, and as I said, I was telling somebody the other day that during that year at INSEAD, my Facebook friends probably increased by 10-fold, but my real friends increased by 2-fold, and that's what mattered. But while things were going well, I was starting to get that nagging feeling of status quo. You could probably guess that by now. I was starting to think, well, got a job, got married, all seems well. What next? What next? And what came next was exciting, different, and something I hadn't expected. So I became part of a grassroots initiative called Homeward Bound earlier this year. And the whole idea is their vision is to create a global collaboration of women in 10 years to address issues of climate change across the world and gender parity. The idea is to talk about the role of women leaders, how we need leadership, how we need women to be part of some of the decision making and influencing what happens going forward. And so they selected about 80 women from all over the world. I am probably the only Indian in the cohort this year. And they've recruited women mostly from science and technology. Why? Why would you say science and technology? For a couple of reasons. One being that science is evidence-based. A lot of people who come from science background tend to be evidence-based. And if you're going to bring the idea of why climate change is real, the CO2 levels are actually increasing, the flooding is actually, the risk of flooding is actually real, then you need to be rooted in the science and the evidence that's behind this, which is one of the reasons. The other thing is, a lot of these solutions will lie in technology. Whether you're talking renewable energy, clean tech, a lot of it is going to lie in technology. So if we are going to think about solutions for the future, We need to rein in our science and technology talent, get them to start thinking about it. And the third thing is, there's actually quite a differential impact depending on which socioeconomic class you belong to, whether you're a developing country or a developed country, whether you're part of the agriculture or whether you're living in an urban city setting. So there is a lot of differential impact which we can talk and think about, which is why they focused on that. There are three elements to the whole idea of Homeward Bound. One is the leadership. So the idea is that all the women they have recruited would be going through a leadership program as they go through the year. So just to put it in context, it's a 12-month virtual program, and the idea is to talk about generate women leaders for the future who can actually influence policy and decision making to address climate change going forward. So one element of it is leadership training. So we have a call every month in which we talk about different aspects of leadership and what it means to be your leader or start to going out and talk about a topic that you're passionate about. The second thing is awareness about the topic. Why is climate change important? Why do we need to do more about it? Why do we need more women to be part of this decision making? And why do we need them to be part of the influencing? Which is why I'm here to talk to you about that topic. So that's part of the awareness. And the third thing, which you probably have heard about, is an expedition, an all-female expedition to Antarctica in February. And the idea behind it, you would ask me, why Antarctica? Why go so far away? To actually answer this question, we could do it in the conference room next door. A couple of reasons. One is, if we are going to create a class of women who are a class of leaders, and you say leaders, right, who actually believe in it, they need to first understand how bad it is. If you were going to sort out a factory which wasn't working, before you can diagnose this, you need to be at site to understand how bad it is. So part of it is to actually educate in how bad is it, and Antarctica is one of the regions where it's worst affected by climate change. Okay? We will be going to all the science stations there, trying to understand what does it mean, what do we have to do going forward, how bad is the evidence behind it, and be able to bring that. It's almost like a leadership conference and ship for 3 weeks. The other reason will also be to build our credibility as women leaders as we go forward. Our own understanding and being able to take it to the masses to be able to understand that. And beyond everything else, to get the world to take notice. If we did a conference in the room next door, nobody would actually care. But actually to get people to take notice that it's important for us to think about it. It's important for us to think about it, the role of leaders and what they can do in addressing this problem is one of the reasons why we do this. And a lot of you are probably wondering that why are we talking about women leaders? Why are we talking about gender parity? How does that even link to climate change? Why should we think about it? So, as I talked about the differential impact that different societies have, what you would also realize is that climate change has a gendered impact. Men and women are actually differently impacted because of their role in society, the gender role in their society. So let me give you an example. In most rural areas, women are responsible for fetching water, right? Women are largely responsible for that. Now, currently, maybe it takes 45 minutes to an hour to go get water, come back in, and you can go about your daily job. As climate change is becoming more severe, droughts are becoming severe. So a woman or a girl is spending about 3 to 4 hours actually just getting water, which means she cannot go to school. She cannot actually have an income generating activity. I'll give you another example. For a number of households largely, taking care of the ill falls to the woman. Now with lack of water or clean water, waterborne diseases are increasing already, which means you have more sick people at home. And the burden of that care also falls mostly on the women, which means again, they're unable to actually educate themselves, to be able to upskill themselves, which is why we talk about how climate change actually affects gender differently. And it's to say because of the way our society has different roles for genders. It's the roles that we've defined within our society for men and women, which are differently affected. I read recently about a village, I think it's called Bengalville, a village where a man actually marries 2 to 3 times because just to have enough manpower, enough resource to go get water. They call them water wives. You can Google this. And it sounds funny, But actually, it talks about how it affects the different genders. It doesn't happen the other way. You know? So I think there is also, if you start to read about it, there's a lot of recognition by the UN about the gender mandate. The idea is basically that there is a complex interaction between gender parity, between climate change, and how we will address that. If we are going to make policies to address climate change, we cannot make policies which only affect 50% of the population. You need to bring the perspective of the rest 50% of the population. And the one way you can do that is by bringing more women leaders in the decision-making process. Also, men and women have complementary styles in leadership, right? So if women are really good in thinking of the long-term nature of it, men are really good at delivering today. You know, this is the deadline, this needs to be done. They're really good at that. If we were able to complement and combine that by having, you know, a seat at the table for both men and women, we will make better decisions as a community, as a society. Women are more take care of the vulnerable. They will never leave the young or the old behind. You know, men can be quite directive in terms of let's go achieve the goal. So the idea is not to say we need to displace one or the other. The idea is that we need them to be part of the discussion. And as you go on into teams, into you become managers yourself, you have teams yourself, think about the value of diversity. Think about what it means to actually have, you know, the complementary nature of the skills that both genders bring. And if you go back, it's not, we're asking for what's a reflection of today's society or the world outside, the reality. The world outside is 50% men and women. We just don't reflect it in our workplaces or when it comes to decision making. And there is a huge recognition now in terms of women as leaders and agents of change in climate change. They tend to be the keepers of natural resource because of their role, which is why 80 women have decided to go to Antarctica to raise this as a topic of concern, to raise this as something we should all talk about within our communities, within our families, and be able to respond. Now, why should we all care about gender parity? Why should we care about it? Is it just a women's movement? Is it, you know, them trying to take positions away? Is that what it is? No. I tend to think of it differently. I tend to think of it as breaking stereotypes. If women are able to do roles beyond what their gender dictates, men can do roles which go beyond their gender dictates. You no longer have to match up to what's the definition of, you know, a macho man who's the breadwinner and who does everything. It redefines the definition of what the stereotype is. It redefines it and gives both men and women the space to do something different and actually go beyond the expectation that society lands on you. The other thing, as I talked about, is the complementary mindset. You learn from each other. You start to see a facet of your own personality. The more you interact with, when I have teams which are more diverse and mixed, I learn more from them than having a set of people who look like me, behave like me, and talk like me. So the more diverse you can be and the more inclusive you can be, you will get more value out of it. As a personal growth, you will see more out of it. And also, it makes men be emotionally available in friendships, in partnerships, in fatherhood. Today, I think if I talk to my colleagues, if they want to go home and take care of the baby, they probably say, we want to take a vacation. Because it's not okay for them to say, I want to go home and take care of the baby. Or if they have an ailing mother at home, they tend to say, oh, I'm going to take some vacation time off or holiday and then do that. So the idea is, how do we actually break that concept? How do we break the stereotype and make people more available, be able to do what you actually want and have diversity? And so I guess that was a snapshot of what I've done in the last 8 years. How the idea of leadership has changed for me, as which started out as being a Gen Second Sharavati, to wanting to be really senior and only defining leadership by the title. Today, the topics that I care about, gender parity, climate change, I can start here and talk about it. I can start to do different things about it. So I now actively blog about the research on gender parity and climate change. This is one of my first talks, but I've got a couple of other talks lined up to actually talk about the idea, to get more people involved in it. And this is where leadership has changed for me. I don't need to wait to be a VP or a SVP. I started today. wherever I am. And also in terms of defining my passion, healthcare, emerging markets, climate change, gender parity, they've become some of the things I truly care about. And I've started to see how I can do that in addition to a day job, a corporate job, or whatever that might be. So as I bring that to you, I recommend you think about what you care about, what you value, and given the resources available to you, how do you actually make a change? If you would like to follow more about what I'm doing, and also the journey to Antarctica, feel free to follow me on Facebook. It's a public page, Purvi's Journey, or on Twitter. You're welcome to contact me through LinkedIn as well. But happy to take any questions.
Very good. I would like Professor Kanagaran to the HOD of Biotech Department to felicitate Purvi with the token of gratitude.